Let's start the first part of the seminar. Uh, Please welcome the moderator, Dr. Shen Huixia, from School of Medicine of Tongji University, Office of International Education and Cooperation.
Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dr. Shen from International Office, and it's a pleasure and a privilege for me to moderate the session for the topic of the role and the contribution of universities during a pandemic. And firstly, warm welcome to all gathered here and joined online for this meeting. And we are very fortunate today to have Professor Huang. I hope I pronounced right. And Professor Xu from our side as our guest speakers. We will provide speeches from the perspectives of Mexico and China, and about 15 to 20 minutes each. And again, after that, we will have time for comments and questions. So first, I'm pleased to present Professor Huang. He is a professor at Basic Science Department at the School of Medicine and Health Science, Mexico City campus. And he is also the chief of Hospital Preparedness Department at the National Institute of Medical Science and Health, the Yudhoyon, which means top national institute in Mexico. He has several chapter books and publications, and the latest one is the low harm score for predicting mortality in patients diagnosed with COVID-19, a multi-centric validation study. So let's welcome Professor Huang Yudhoyon.
Hello, Shanghai. I would like to start by expressing my gratitude for this kind invitation to all the authorities in order to share with you some of the stories from my country through this conversation for the next 20 minutes. I also want to say greetings to my friends in Mexico. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to be part of this activity at Tonji University. In Mexico, we have public and private universities. In my case, I will be referring to a private university known as Tecnológico de Monterrey. Monterrey is a wealthy, hard-working industrial city at the northern part of Mexico. Here, 78 years ago, this university was created. In the photo, you may see at the left bottom of the photo the rectory building. At the right, an emblematic architectonic building referred as the napping holder, dedicated for research, and far behind, a classic view of the horse-saddle mountain. The rectory building has in its facade the symbol of knowledge and science conquering over ignorance and stagnation. Within the private universities, we hold an advanced position by the number of students, very close to 93,000 in 26 different campi around the country. The number of professors working here daily are slightly more than 7,000. As any university around the world, we do have a social commitment and responsibility, and as consequence of these multiple interventions were deployed during the first years of COVID pandemic. So many of them were led under the Students' Initiative, and that's a very important point. Because of the time constraint, it's impossible for me to talk about all of them, but I will mention some of the most relevant ones I consider from my personal perspective. The goals defined since the beginning were improving access for information so the healthcare workers and general public will learn. Knowledge is a powerful tool to improve life conditions. Also, defining preventive measures to decrease the number of infected persons based on the best evidence available in the moment. Understanding the economic and social impact in order to propose public health interventions and political measures to decrease the impact of the pandemic. Just to have an idea, as a consequence of this pandemic, 12 million of Mexican citizens, from a total of 126 million, had crossed the barrier of living under poverty condition this year. acknowledging this that poverty is not just measured as an economic perspective, but also the access to rights and services like healthcare, potable water, electricity, internet, etc. Modifying the way we used to teach was also a challenge. Changing to the online version and improving the skills of the teachers to be able to share their knowledge in this new way to the students. Increasing the different scenarios where to share knowledge between experts and enhancing the cohesion of the university community. We try to understand the local needs of our community to then propose local solutions, depending mostly from the citizen rather from the government. One of the most significant events was to make the decision of closing the university. The relevance was that this intervention was ahead of government's policies. It was a way of leading an intervention trying to reduce the dispersion of the SARS-CoV-2 between the community. Partnership with public and private stakeholders gave place to the foundation named Together for Health. Together, side by side, the government and private corporations collected funds to make a common project in favor of all the Mexicans. Here we can see some of them, like the National Autonomous University of Mexico, some banks, and some communication industries. They helped donating through different interventions like personal protective equipment, and we should remember that your country that moment was closed to the rest of the world, and many of these equipment were not available anywhere for several months. Very sick COVID patients needed mechanical ventilation support, but the hospitals were not prepared for the demand, and buying respirators became a complicated issue even when money was not the limitation. I'm gonna share with you a 4 minutes video.
Bueno, todos sabemos que este tema de la pandemia es un tema muy complicado. Nos dimos cuenta que hacían falta proveedores de ventiladores y es cuando aparece aquí en escena un joven del TEC de Monterrey, Ramsés Galás, que nos propone el poder fabricar con talento mexicano un ventilador.
Soy profesor del TEC de Monterrey, me especializo en el tema de infarto agudo del miocardio, entonces digamos que soy una especie de mezcla entre cardiólogo con ingeniero. Y en marzo de este año precisamente se libera una convocatoria en Montreal en donde convocaban a empresas de todo el mundo a desarrollar ventiladores de bajo costo. Un consejero del TEC, el licenciado José Coppel, me invita y me inyecta recursos financieros precisamente para acelerar esa iniciativa. Mi equipo de trabajo es el ingeniero Arnoldo Heredia, que es el ingeniero principal de diseño y desarrollo de todo el cerebro electrónico del dispositivo del ventilador.
Nos abre las puertas el TEC de Monterrey. TEC de Monterrey Campus Sonora Norte, nos dicen las instalaciones, aquí están. No supimos ni cómo, en una semana y media ya teníamos máquinas, ya habíamos empezado simultáneamente el desarrollo del ventilador y empezamos a hacer las caretas. Las caretas fue lo primero.
Creo que hay mucho talento en el país, pero a veces está desconectado. Entonces creo que ahí los líderes y las instituciones tenemos que hacer esa tarea también de conectar ese talento. Aprovechamos
una convocatoria que hizo el Instituto Nacional de Nutrición de fabricar con capacidades propias estos ventiladores.
Metalsa adopta nuestro diseño, entonces comenzamos a trabajar con ellos ininterrumpidamente desde mediados de abril. Una de las, digamos, de las características importantes del diseño de nuestro ventilador es que es 100% control digital, 100% programable, adaptable, mejorable, actualizable.
Nuestro ventilador es de pistón. ¿Qué significa eso? Toma el aire del ambiente. Entonces, al tomar el aire del ambiente, no dependes de los suministros del hospital. Por lo tanto, se presta a usarlo en una zona de emergencia.
Arnoldo Heredia se traslada de Monterrey a la Ciudad de México precisamente para estar trabajando ahora directamente en las instalaciones del Instituto Nacional de Nutrición. También a la iniciativa después se suma el apoyo directo del gobierno federal, el propio COFEPRIS, muy dispuesto precisamente a colaborar para hacer todo el tema de la aprobación regulatoria. Pretendemos hacer 1000 de estos ventiladores. Eso significa que un mismo ventilador pueda atender a 50, 60 mil, 70 mil personas a nivel nacional. Nosotros ya comenzamos la producción para la entrega de los primeros 400 ventiladores.
Yo lo que rescato es, ante una crisis sanitaria como esta de la pandemia del COVID, los egos se guardaron en la bolsa
y se pusieron las voluntades a integrarse y cooperar. Aquí no había de que yo sé más que tú, sino cómo te ayudo.
Primero que nada recibimos el apoyo de la familia Coppel. Sin ese apoyo no hubiera sido posible esto. Después se suma la iniciativa Metalsa, Proesa, FEMSA, Bocar, NEMAC, Grupo Alfa de Monterrey.
Lo que movió toda esta red que se constituyó para este resultado magnífico es que este ventilador es el amor y el compromiso por este país.
La verdad es que esto es una muestra de que las colaboraciones en equipo sí logran resultados.
So that is the reason why, through a strong effort of partners within Tecnológico de Monterrey and other Mexican institutes, the goal of achieving technological development in order to be able to produce locally respirators was a fundamental project with a very important impact on the pandemic preparedness plan. Obviously, respirators need to prepare healthcare workers to program them and knowledgeable nurses to care for the patients, as the same as appropriate facilities. This one is an example of another intervention. In this case, it's an application to have the most actual data regarding the trend of the dispersion of the disease along our country. This information is valuable to define public health interventions and prepare the healthcare system locally. As mentioned before, information is extremely valuable for making sound-based policies. The screening of residual waters from the communities and also education facilities was another target, looking to have a better understanding of the dispersion of the disease. Taking in account that Mexico is one of the countries around the world applying less screening tests in the general population, 0.4 for every million inhabitants, compared with Spain, 28.6 for every million inhabitants. This was a new intervention applying metabolomic technology surveillance. Elements from the university joined their knowledge to enhance the government's campaign promoting health social distancing through this cartoon called Susana Distancia, where in Spanish Susana together is a female name, but at the same time it could be read at your healthy distance. And in my two last examples, I want to share this observatory followed by students who will check the facts of information available in social media and news, trying to light up fake news. They may just confuse the population, so they were trying to resolve this problem. Remember that the amount of information generated during a very short time has made it impossible to keep up with the most updated data. Hope Messages is an application developed by students to involve healthcare workers in COVID care hospitals, to work as messengers to transmit messages from relatives to inpatients. Up to date, COVID patients do not have visits from their relatives, even at the end of life moments, in most of our hospitals in the country. That is why this intervention is so valuable. The last minutes of my intervention will be used to share some personal reflections. How do we see the future? By sure, with uncertainty, but also with hope. We have learned a lot during this year. Transmission mechanisms are much clearer, and we now can focus on these topics to prevent infections. We hold our hope in Mexicans' willingness to help in adverse conditions. There is a lot to do in improving education online. Not everybody in Mexico has access to internet, in average 70%. Treating or decreasing mental health impact of the social distancing measures is a goal. Also, we need new ways to share wealth in a fair way. What do we need to do in a close future? Certainly, many challenges are ahead. But basically, we need to keep an open mind looking forward for innovation. That being said, architectural improvement in health and education facilities should be implemented looking for best natural ventilation, changing laws in order to make face mask use mandatory, at least in public scenarios, increasing research in post-COVID syndrome and its rehab, improving public awareness on mental health needs, and developing strategies for appropriate mental health care access. Finally, understanding the new environment, where telemedicine will be part of the standard of care in limited situations. Learning through simulation labs. And please, and don't take me wrong, improving Zoom-like technologies and protecting personal time for teachers and healthcare workers, because nowadays it has become an overused strategy. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open to any comments or questions if there's any. Chai Yi.
I'd like to congratulate Professor Gutierrez for this very impressive presentation. You will know more about your fight, adaptation, and innovation during the pandemic. And because of time limit, we will proceed to the next speech and leave the discussion later. And so I'd like to call on Professor Xu Jingfu, the second speaker. He's a professor and chief physician at Department of Respiratory and Critical Care Medicine, vice president of Shanghai Pulmonary Hospital, head of Institute of Respiratory Medicine, Tongji University. Dr. Xu published over 100 articles in great journals, including Nature, Immunology, Lancet, Stem Cells, and so on. So let's welcome Professor Xu.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and also very impressive talk from Dr. Gutierrez. Today, I would like to talk something about the COVID-19 in Shanghai, China, the role of Tongji University. Of course, everybody knows that actually in China and also in Shanghai nowadays, the COVID-19 control is okay, I think. Yeah. Nowadays in Shanghai, we only have the cases from the airport and also from the other route from outside. You can see from this picture that last year, in early of last year, we have a lot of patients infected with COVID-19, and after that, we keep a very low incidence of COVID-19. Talking about Tonji University, here is the Tonji University, and this university is a very high reputation at home and abroad. It's a century-old university, and also we can see a lot of very beautiful building, and not the building, but also famous for science, engineering, medicine, literature, and also law. Also, the medical school of medicine of Tongji University is a broad platform for training future medical scientists. We have a lot of medical elite teachers and many third-class affiliated hospitals, and also I am from the affiliated pulmonary hospital, and a large number of clinical experts and also rich clinical resources. This is the Shanghai Pulmonary Hospital is my hospital, and it should be the world's largest specialty hospital, especially for lung disease. And you can see from last year, when the first case was reported in Wuhan, a lot of staffs in Tongji University affiliated hospital, they went to Wuhan city at the first time, and very early, not well known everything about the COVID-19, and they go to Wuhan to support the staffs in Wuhan. And these are things when they worked at there. And also, we can see in Wuhan, we have the makeshift hospitals and also the community health centers in Shanghai, in Jinshan district. We have done a lot of work for combat against the COVID-19. Not only the community work, our scientists in Tongji University School of Medicine, Dr. Zhou Wei from medical school, his group, the first time figured out the distribution of COVID-19 receptor gene in the lung, suggesting that all type 2 epithelial cells may be involved in the transmission. This paper was officially published in Blue Journal in USA, and it was published in January last year, which is very early, and we very have a higher influence for all the scientific works. And also, just now, the Dean mentioned at last year, at the invitation of China University of New Zealand, an online assistant platform will be joined for overseas students. We help them to fight not only for some information, but also the mental health concerning. Also, the university donated personal protective equipment to other countries from China. How about the online learning and teaching? Actually, for last year, the earlier of last year, we stopped the on-site teaching and learning, but we did the teaching and learning online. Here is the online themes for the non-stop teaching and learning. This is really a crisis for students and teachers for last year, because in March 2020, during the outbreak, not actually the online learning teaching is an untested and unprecedented scale. After the peak of outside, the outbreak passed. The offline teaching began with last September. Now we use online teaching with diversified online teaching platform and lesson communications and multimedia assistant teaching lessons. Consequently, crisis drive change underwent. Not only from teacher, students, and also the teaching environment. How about the students return to campus in Tongji University? Before the students returned to the campus, Dean Zheng Jialin from Tongji University School of Medicine wrote a letter to the students on behalf of all the academic staff to encourage them to carry forward a spirit of helping each other in the same boat, cooperating with epidemic prevention and control work. And after the students came back to campus, we focused on student safety and timely availability sales and in-kind donations. And mainly we need the drugs to and the vaccines to fight the COVID-19 at last. So COVID-19 vaccination in China is very very emergency. Actually, from the earlier of last year, Chinese scientists has started the clinical trials for vaccination. We can see that from last year, last June and August, we can see a lot of patients and some important, very important clinical trial for COVID-19 vaccine was published. And also, we can see the COVID-19 vaccine for emergency use was approved by WHO this year, earlier last month. And maybe a few days ago, the two inactive SARS-CoV-2 vaccines on COVID-19 infection was published in journal. Now we have some choice for vaccination. Also, we have very impressive speed of vaccination. You can see from April 15, we only have 180 million patients was vaccinated, and we have six registered and marketed in 6 countries, and also we have more than 100 countries requested procedure. For example, China's vaccine can help the world. Here is a very small city embrace. After vaccinated Chinese vaccine, 80% fewer infection and more than 90% fewer deaths was achieved. How about China's and also Shanghai's allocation of vaccine? We started from key groups and then high risk groups and other groups. And also from last December, China officially launched vaccine for key groups. And the most vaccine in Shanghai is inactive vaccine. And also now we have viral vector vaccine and recombinant subunit vaccine. How about the vaccination service arrangement in Shanghai? Actually, we have the health service center or general hospital usually did the major work. And we have temporary vaccination unit will be set up if the vaccination enrollment is needed. Here is the updated data for the vaccination. You can see as of 31 May, we have 660 million dose was vaccinated in China. Actually, we did some works at the early of COVID-19 pandemic. At the early of last year, we did some work to assess the risk factor for SARS-CoV-2 infection in patients presenting with symptoms in Shanghai, China. This work focused on the effective screening and early identification of the key to prevent the COVID-19. we used 25 designated hospital to design this study. And this was published in National Digital Health. I think I don't need to say so much about this. And also, after a little bit observation of the COVID-19 situation, we find that the age is very important, and we find that age is a wide risk factor for prognosis of COVID-19 patients, not only for mortality and also severity. So this work was published in ERJ, and also I think this is very important to tell the clinic to physician to pay more attention to the old patient. We can find the 60 years as a threshold for the mortality and also other characteristics. And also this, and also we have done a very, I think, very significant work for the corticosteroids therapy. I think we are the first time to mention that corticosteroid should be the very effective treatment for COVID-19. After that, the WHO signed this paper and approved by the English study. The England study. This is the first review to figure out the corticosteroid on COVID-19. I thank you for attention, and I just spend some time to introduce these works. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Xu, for your excellent presentation. Actually, bring us back to the very difficult but exciting period, and also make us be more confident in of winning the war against COVID-19. And before we open the questions for audience, I'd like to maybe ask Professor Yudhoyon Race and Professor Xu to make comments about each other. So at first, may I invite Professor Yudhoyon Race. Hi, Professor.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I congratulate for this lecture. It's very important for us to learn from your experience. I have some questions that maybe you can help us to find the answer. Like, for example, what are the lessons that you will consider as healthcare workers you have learned during this year, specifically regarding COVID patient care?
I'm sorry, would you please say again?
Is it possible for you to share with us the lessons that you have learned as healthcare worker caring for COVID patients? Like, after 1 year of experience, what have you learned as a group of healthcare workers?
Thank you. This is really a very important question because actually from the beginning of the COVID-19 in Wuhan, actually we have a very severe lessons and a lot of health workers was infected, and even some colleagues was died. But after we get familiar with this virus, I think you should do the best try to do well with the hospital infection control treatment moments. Until now, in Shanghai, clinical health center, we have zero infection uh, health workers from the beginning to till now. So the important thing is we should pay the most attention to the hospital infection control principles. That's the most important thing. Thank you.
May I have another question, please?
Yes.
So, I would like to learn from your experience with obese or overweight patients. In Mexico, 7 from every 10 adults they will have overweight or they may be obese. How is the challenge for the Chinese people in the Shanghai area?
Sorry, actually, I didn't get it.
So in Mexico, we have a huge problem with
Oh,
obesity and
yes.
overweight.
Okay. Mm.
But I don't know how is the problem in your hospital and in your area compared with Mexico. 7 from every 10 persons they have a weight problem, and that makes a huge difference in mortality with our patient with COVID.
Yes. Yeah. I totally would agree with you about that because we have the lessons from Shanghai Health Clinical Center. We have two patients with obesity. Uh, they finally didn't pass the challenge. Uh, the obesity is obviously is a very important or risk factor for COVID-19 patients. For the treatment, uh, we uh, we have some suggestions. First, we should pay more attention to these patients, and second, maybe we should uh, put the treatment forward. I mean, maybe the corticosteroid should be used earlier, a little bit, and also we should calculate the doses of the drugs, not only for routine doses, but for the uh, uh, how to say for the 体重 weight, yeah, weight calculated doses should be used in these patients. And also we need to do some uh, physical exercise if the patients can tolerate, because we need to prevent the embolism for these patients. Uh, Maybe we need others. I think you may have more experience about this. I would like to learn from you about this. Okay. Dr. Goodness, do you have some information or also experience about just now you said about this, the obesity patients with COVID-19?
In our hospital in Mexico City, obesity is a marker of severity, even more than the age and even more than comorbidities as diabetes or hypertension. It's more complicated to treat patients with overweight and obesity than treating patients with other illness that do not represent so much problem. The second problem we have in our hospital is the overinfections. When we treat patients with steroids or with antibiotics, we finish having high resistance from these bacteria, and patients finish dying not of COVID but superbugs infections. So epidemiological interventions are a very important goal in our hospital in order to achieve a lower level of patients dying. I hope I answered something to your question.
Okay.
Good morning, Shanghai. Buenas tardes, noches en México. Voy a hacer una pregunta muy breve y prefiero hacerla en español. El señor me va a ayudar con la traducción con el doctor. Muy interesantes comentarios, presentaciones del doctor Gutiérrez y del doctor Han. Muchas gracias. Yo quisiera que nos compartieran su reflexión sobre lo que sigue para los próximos meses. El virus va a diferentes velocidades en las diversas regiones del mundo, pero creo que podría, no sé, haber ciertos patrones que ustedes nos pudieran compartir. Muchas gracias.
非常感谢两位这个教授刚才的这个精彩的介绍和演讲。我有一个问题，就是关于你们对未来几个月这个就是新冠疫情它的一个可能的一个发展态势。我们知道现在在世界上一些比较主要的城市，这个人口密集的地方，等于说这个新冠疫情还是在发展的。就是想问问看两位学者，就对于未来的这个新冠疫情可能的一个演化的情况的一个预测。谢谢。
So, what we think in Mexico is that we will need to learn to live with COVID. It arrived to stay. But we have to learn how to care for everybody by using fundamental things like face masks, social distancing, and appropriate ventilation. This is not the last pandemic we will have to treat, but now we know that we have to be prepared. We have learned there's inequality in the healthcare services. We should look forward for a fair distribution of access to healthcare.
Yes, I totally agree with Dr. Gutierrez. Because recently just paper published in Science said that the virus will be integrated to the DNA of humans. So we need to learn how to exist with this virus in the recent in a relatively long time, I think. Obviously, we need to rely on the vaccine, and hopefully we will have the drugs for this virus. But I don't think we have really clear future recently. Absolutely, the vaccine will help the world to get well. But we need the drugs to prevent and also to cure this disease. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So because of time limit, I'm afraid we need to close the session. And I'd like to thank our speakers for their excellent presentation and our audience for their hearty cooperation. I believe this gathering will bring us into the atom and will furnish a springboard for future cooperation, maybe in medicine and life science, but also in in multiple disciplines. And thank you all. It's time for a coffee break, and we will back soon. Yeah, thank you.